March 26, 2021. Hey folks, Anon here, fully healed now after a few days. Now, let's cut to the chase and I tell you how I got my supernatural abilities. However, before I could tell you my tragic, devastating backstory, some background. When my parents were alive and I was a toddler, we lived in Ontario, Canada. I'm not quite sure the exact location on the map of where we are, but we live in a region that has a lot of forests. I'm not sure why, but my parents live isolated, the closest town being 5 minutes away. I don't remember much, but it was a small house, but it was enough for the three of us to live in. However, when I turned 3, my parents were killed by a dogman in front of my eyes. As I said previously, I don't know why, but instead of being scared or sad, I felt nothing. My therapist chalked it up to my way to process trauma. I don't really know. Anyways, I was helpless against these white wolf creatures. However, I was saved by 3 hunters before it could kill me. Ever since then, instead of living in an orphanage as you may think, I was actually put in a government facility. I found out there are many kids like me who lost their parents and survived an encounter with a monster. The kids surviving after their parents died after a monster attack is a lot more common than you think. So, there are 2 ways for you to become a monster hunter. One way is that you've been selected by the government due to your skills. You have to be extremely good at combat or be someone useful to help the other hunters. Most people that became hunters were ex-military. The second option being is that you have to be adopted by the government. What do I mean by that? Well, like I said before, many kids become orphans after a monster attack. If that child is alive, they would be placed in the care of the government. They give the child necessary needs such as food, clothes, toys, and amongst other things. We even got education. However, unlike normal schools, they added a new subject which is Hunter class. It's a subject that involves monsters, the history of monsters, their weaknesses, and why you should become a hunter. Then, after you turn 9, they will ask you a question I will never forget. Are you hunter or prey? They explain more of what they just said. What they're trying to say is if you choose to be prey, the government will give you an easy life. They will help you get a career of your choosing, pay for your needs, your college fees, and pay a huge amount of money for keeping your mouth shut. The other option was obvious, and I choose, surprise, the hunter option. After choosing my option, I was moved to a different facility. This one was much cleaner than the last one. The new facility functioned as the hunter's boot camp, basically. Our instructor trained our bodies to the limits and gave us hell on earth. We also learned more information about monsters during class. When I searched up military boot camp training, their training to us looked like warm-up. I swear, I was gonna die before I graduate from training. During my time in Hunter's Boot Camp, or more commonly known as Hunter's Academy, in class we received an invitation. It was an invitation to take part in a program called the Monster Hunter Program. Apparently, it was a program designed to create the strongest monster hunters. We would train much harder and get extra lessons. So basically, what I'm already doing in the academy, but on steroids. I don't know why I signed up, but I did anyway. If I remember correctly, There were about 80 kids with varying ages that signed up at the program. If I thought I was gonna die, I thought I was in hell. One time, we were forced to fight an actual monster, a rake to be exact. It was my first fight with a monster, and I'm not gonna lie, it was really thrilling. Not to brag, but I was the one who did the final blow before the monster died. I was only 11 at the time. We soon began fighting tougher monsters, however with an aid of a veteran hunter. As you expected, there were a lot of people who regret being here, and even traumatized because of it. In just the first week, there were 9 people that left the program. Eventually, in our final year there were only 25 of us remaining. In our final year, we faced our greatest test yet. We would split in 5 groups with 5 people each for our test. The test was surviving a desolate place and infested with monsters without aid for 2 months. Each group would be placed into a different location in order to avoid helping each other. Unfortunately for my group, we were placed in Antarctica, the coldest region we could be placed in. Thankfully, we could bring in our jackets as well as one item to bring along. The rest is what you find in the wilderness. I brought a knife with me. I doubt I could make anything in the snowfield region. We were dropped off via helicopter with nothing but the items we brought along and our jackets. While I remember the whole thing, I vaguely remember the names of the other people I was with, probably because I just avoid them. It was difficult surviving in Antarctica without assistance. We had to hunt for fish, penguins, and polar bears. We also needed wood for fire. We couldn't find one after 3 days of searching, but eventually, we found an abandoned cabin, enough to house 3 of us. At night, we took turns sleeping inside of the cabin and keeping watch outside. Thankfully, there were multiple sticks in the cabin that we used to warm ourselves every time I went out and watched. We were able to survive peacefully for about 3 weeks of the survival test. However, one night, while the others were sleeping and I was on guard duty, I had nothing else to do except stare at the flames that are keeping me warm. Then, I heard a low growl, and my head immediately turned to the direction where the growl came from. However, it was pitch black, and I couldn't see anything. I was tempted to get up and check, but instead, I continued to sit although I had my hand resting on my knife, ready for anything that could jump in the darkness. Nothing came out, and after being in full attention for about 5 minutes, I finally relaxed. It was probably a polar bear or a wolf that got scared off. I didn't get much sleep, and I began to doze off. However, I got startled when the door of the cabin opened. It was my teammate. And while I don't remember much about our conversation, I think this is how it went. "Jesus, you scared the hell out of me," I said, raising my voice. He rubbed his tired eyes. "Sorry, you gotta go pee," he says before walking towards the darkness. "Wait." He turned his head to look at me with a I heard some odd noises. "Be careful out there," I warned, but he just waved me off. "Fuck off, Anon. I already apologized for when I scared you, alright?" He said before entering the unseen darkness, where his foot crunching the snow could only be heard, before fading into nothing. I, on the other hand, said nothing. He probably won't listen to me, no matter what I say. I'm sure he'll be fine. I doubt a pack of wolves or a polar bear can take down an almost graduate hunter. If he needs help, I could keep an ear out for him. After a few minutes, I was about to doze off again, but one of my teammates came out and said that it was her turn to guard. Silently taking her, I got up and headed towards the door, but before I could, she stopped me. "Hey, where is... I haven't seen him since I woke up." "Oh, he said he wanted to pee. However, it has been a few minutes and he hasn't come back yet," I said, and she nodded. "I see. I'll keep an eye out for him." I gave a quick thanks before lying down in the warm cabin. The next morning, we found out... You know what? Let's make it easier for the both of us to understand. I'll make an artificial name for all my teammates so we don't get confused on who is who. These are just some random names. The guy who went out, Angelo. The woman that took my place in guard duty, Sarah. The other female teammate, Sydney. Got it? Anyways, the next morning we found out Angelo hasn't come back. Me and Sarah gave out our accounts about the night. However, I left the part where I heard growls in my time outside. We grabbed all the weapons we could bring and headed out to find Angelo. While the girls looked hopeful, I wasn't. I'm pretty sure he was killed by a cryptid. There is no way a polar bear or a wolf would be able to take out even an experienced hunter, especially so quietly. I remember holding my spear-shaped sharpened wood and looking at all directions. After nearly 4 hours of searching, we were about to give up and head back. However, we spotted a big cave. Immediately, I knew that there was something off about it and gave off an eerie aura. The other two both agreed to look for Angelo in the cave. I was hesitant, but eventually decided to come with them. The cave was actually a lot brighter than I imagined to be. There were a few holes on the roof to give a bit of sunlight, which made venturing the cave far much more easier. The cave was ginormous. I thought I would be cramped there, especially with 3 people, but it wasn't. You could put 30 people there and it still won't be cramped. Well, works easier for the all of us. We ventured into the cave, trying to find the lost hunter in training. As I was searching, I heard a scream. It was loud enough to echo throughout the cave. I immediately head towards the scream, only to find Sarah putting both hands in her mouth while tears run across her cheeks and Sydney looked extremely pale. I turned the direction of what they were looking at. It was Angelo, his lifeless eyes staring at my alive ones. He was... the best way to describe it, he was torn apart. The half of his torso is gone, but not cleanly. It's like someone grabbed him and forcibly ripped him in half. Both of his arms were missing too. I look at the bloodied corpse. I remember feeling indifferent. While I felt bad, but I didn't feel sad or on the verge of throwing up. This was the second time I saw death up close, yet I still feel indifferent. This is a monster's doing. I suddenly spoke aloud. Huh? Sarah said between sobs. I doubt a pack of wolves or anything else could do this to Angelo. The most likely case, we're dealing with a monster, I explained. I turned to Sydney, who grimly nodded. He's right. There's no way any animal could do this to him. Then what do we do? I don't want to die. Sarah sobbed. We stood there in silence. The only sound that could be heard was Sarah's quiet sobs. I gripped my wooden spear harder, and I began to plan our next move could be. We have no choice. "We have to kill it," Sydney gravely said, crossing her arms. She says it with confidence, but I could tell she was scared. Her shaking was unmistakable, and her eyes occasionally looked at the entrance of the cave. "Why? Are you insane?" Sarah screamed at her. Her voice echoed in the cave. "We have no choice. It probably knows there are more humans aside from Angelo. The reason it probably still hasn't killed us is to probably fuck with us." Sydney sighs before speaking. "We're gonna have to leave the cabin in a week in order to go to our destination. We have to prepare and gather up supplies for the journey. I doubt we'll do anything when the fucker is trying to rip us apart." She's right. A bit of context: before we were dropped off, we were told we had to go to a location where they could pick us up. They showed us a map of where they're gonna drop us and the location we to go when the 2 months are over and they can pick us up. We couldn't bring the map with us, but instead we memorized it. We estimated we will take us a week before we get there from our cabin, so we need lots of supplies for our journey. Thankfully, we'll know we're in the right spot if we can spot a black flag sticking out. Back to the situation at hand, it would be impossible to collect supplies when there's a monster hunting us. We had no choice but to kill it. So we hatched a plan. Since this place was most likely its habitat, it's only natural they'll come back here. So we hide, covering ourselves in snow to blend in and under the cover of the big snowy blocks, separately from each other. While we were hiding, we wait for the monster to come. I formed theories on what kind of monster we are dealing with, and what kind of class the monster was in. E and D rank are out of the question. They're too weak to fight that even the weakest and inexperienced hunters. C rank maybe, but they didn't make a noise when they attacked Angelo. I'm pretty sure even if they ambushed him, it would make a lot of noise. They had to be strong enough to kill him instantly, but quiet enough for me to not hear it. But then again, the wind was loud last night, so there may be sounds I didn't hear. I continued the theories for what felt like a couple of hours before we heard a loud thumping. My mind was hushed about the theories and instead focused on listening to the sound. I was tempted to peek from my head out, but instead I was still as a statue. Eventually, the creature came to view. Thankfully, I was in an angle where I could see it, but it can't see me. It was really big. What I noticed first is its white fur, covering the whole body, and its shape looks like humanoid, but it looks similar to a gorilla rather than a human. I also noticed it was dragging something. It was a bloodied polar bear. It took a few moments before I finally recognized the monster I was looking at. Coincidentally, it is the brethren of a monster I just fought a few days ago. It was a Yeti, an A-class monster. It was a bit taller and muscular than a Sasquatch, and a bit stronger too. However, what makes a Yeti more dangerous is their aggression. I stared at the monster in a mix of fear and excitement as I waited for the signal for me to strike the beast. It sniffs the air, probably because it smelled us, but before it could fully realize that we were here, "Now!" Sydney shouted in her hiding spot, causing the Yeti to look in her direction. Now the Yeti was distracted. I got out from my hiding spot and with all my might stabbed my spear at the nape of the Yeti. It landed and it roared in pain. I kept pushing the spear deeper, but the muscles was thick. It slowed me down. The Yeti in a quick motion turned to me and used its powerful arms to swing at my abdomen, sending me crashing the wall. I didn't have my supernatural durability at the time, and so I felt one of my ribs crack and blood poured out of my head. I was disoriented, silently thanking for not losing consciousness. However, the monster approached me. I saw its red eyes full of rage. Before it fully reached me, a voice called out, "Hey you, ugly motherfucker!" Sydney shouted at the beast, and it immediately looked at her. As soon as the snowy Sasquatch looked at her, she threw a spear that landed the monster's right eye. The Yeti roared in pain. The roar was so loud it almost ruptured my eardrums. It recovered from the pain and charged at Sydney, who barely rolled to the side to avoid the attack. She didn't have a weapon to defend herself. The weapon was embedded too deep into the monster's eye. Sarah came out of hiding with tears in her eyes with a loud battle cry, tried to stab the monster in the stomach. However, before the attack could land, the monster grabbed the spear, holding it from piercing its skin. The beast growled at her as she stood there frozen. It brought its arms upwards, ready to smash her. Seeing this, I forced my body to move, getting up and dashing at the monster. Using my knife, I stabbed its heel, and I removed my knife and stabbed it again and again and again at a rapid pace. Sydney, while without her weapon, decided to help by climbing at the back of the monster to wrestle with it. She attempts to choke the monster, or at least distract it. The Yeti's attention was now with Sydney and I. I continued to stab at the heel, eventually stopping and backing away to regain my stamina. Its giant arms tried to reach Sydney, but was constantly distracted as Sarah using her spear to stab the monster in the abdomen. Finally, the beast had enough, using its body to slam on the snowy walls. Sydney gasped in pain and immediately lost consciousness. It then turned to Sarah and landed a punch in her face, which sent her flying and crashing to the wall. It then turned to me. It growled, and in response, I growled back. I glared at the beast before me. I quickly grabbed my spear that was on the ground and readied myself. It grabbed Sarah's spear and charged at me, and I charged too. It was moving sluggishly, probably because of the injury I caused in its heel. But I wasn't so hot either. I just now broke my rib. But even then, we ignored the pain and charged at each other. When we were just a few feet away, I threw my spear, but it saw this coming and swiped my spear away and continued charging at me. It now thinks I'm weaponless, but I then revealed my knife that was under my sleeve and threw it, hitting its eye. Both eyes are now gone, and in pain dropped Sarah's spear and roared in pain. Since it couldn't see anymore, it wildly swung its fist in all directions, hoping one of its arms would land on me. I barely dodged attacks. Grabbing Sarah's spear, I stabbed the other heel, causing the monster to kneel. When the beast dropped to its knees, I knew it was time to finish this. I jumped in the air and with a roar stabbed my spear into the nape of the Yeti. My previous attempt softened and weakened the muscles of the monster, which finally allowed my spear to go through the nape and into the throat. In a desperate attempt to get me off, it tried to weakly grab me, but it was futile. As I continued to pour my last bit of strength into pushing my spear deeper, it took almost a minute before its arms finally went limp and its breathing stopped. I got off the monster and leaned against the wall, trying to catch my breath. As I was trying to regain my footing, Cindy regained consciousness and approached me. "Nice one," she said between breaths. I gave a thumbs up. We sat there in silence for a few moments, until Sydney's eyes went wide. Wait, where's Sarah? I didn't say anything and just pointed the direction she was in. Sydney grunted as she forced her aching body to go towards our teammate. I rested my head on the wall and closed my eyes. Then, I heard Sydney throwing up, immediately knowing what that meant. It was to be expected. She did take a full-blown punch in the head from an A-class muscle-bound monster after all. A few moments later, I heard snow crunching. I opened my eyes a little and saw Sydney, who was paler, her eyes red and puffy. It was her eyes that got my attention though. While I forgot her real name, I could never forget those empty eyes of hers. She almost looks like a walking corpse. She walks to me and said, "Let's go," Sydney said simply. I nodded my head weakly. I retrieved my knife and spear and we exited the cave together. We headed back into the cabin and we lived the rest of the week in silence, only talking if we required something. After the week finished, we packed up our food and necessary stuff for our long journey. We finally left the cabin into the destination to wait for the hunters to pick us up. I'll spare you the pointless details of our journey. It was mostly uneventful. We eventually reached our destination when we found the flag. We spent our remaining time in silence. She makes the fire and cooks the food, while I hunt. Although I noticed her behavior was strange, I ignored it and chalked it up to trauma. However, one night, I was laying down, trying to sleep, only to find I couldn't. But I still closed my eyes. The final test is almost over. I just need to wait for 2 more days until they come. Honestly, it was relieving. It was extremely boring spending my time in the middle of nowhere where it was cold and all I did was hunt. Perhaps it was the excitement that caused me to stay awake. I heard rustling. I opened my eyes, just barely enough to see Sydney getting up from her spot, grabbing her spear. I was tempted to get up and ask what she was doing, but I stayed quiet and pretended to be asleep. She quietly walks towards me. Each step she took made my heart pound. I was confused. Why would she go up to me with a weapon? Suddenly, I realized what she might do, but I still didn't move a muscle. Sydney was now next to me. She raised her spear, using the pointed part to bring it downwards. However, I rolled out in time and evaded her attack. I vaguely remember saying, "What the fuck, Sydney?" I screamed at her. I grabbed my own spear to protect myself. She looks at me with her dead eyes. "I have to do it. I have to kill you," she responded, her voice quivering. "But why?" "We don't have enough food to last. I must kill you. I have to survive. I don't want to die," Sydney says, tears leak out of her eyes. I, on the other hand, was confused. We had enough food to last more than 3 weeks, and even if we do run out, I'll just continue to hunt for more. Besides, the test is almost over. It's just a couple of days. It took me a while, but I didn't realize why. Not only she was traumatized by the deaths of her teammates, but the isolation too. I might have been there, but I never interacted with her, and now she has lost her sanity, thinking that only one of us has to survive this. I don't have anything to restrain her, and even if I had one, since she's a trained hunter, she could easily escape and make an attempt on my life again. The only way for me to stop her is to end her. "I want to survive," Sydney sobbed. I closed my eyes. This is the only way. I do too, was all I said before I rushed her with my spear. I thrust my weapon, but she managed to evade it and made a thrust of her own. I barely dodged by ducking. I countered by swinging a spear at her, and she does the same. We struggled to gain dominance of one another before realizing that this was futile, and we both jump away from each other. Unlike the many monsters I faced back then, Cindy was a skilled human, but also that means one hit, it is over. I charge at her with my spear once more, and she does the same. We use our spear like swords, a loud thud every time both of our spears make contact with each other. I back off and gave us room for a breather. We're obviously pretty even, and so needed a plan to surprise her. Then an idea formed, and it transformed to a plan. Get ready. This will be my final attack, I said to her bravely. In response, she puts on a stance, ready to defend any attack that comes from me. I held my spear tightly. I rushed at her while she stood stationary, ready to defend. However, I then threw my spear to the sky. Her eyes followed the spear briefly. However, that was enough time to distract her. In a quick motion, I unsheathed my knife, and before she could defend, I sliced her throat. The battle was over. Cindy dropped her spear and clasped her hands on her throat in a futile attempt to stop the bleeding. Cindy dropped to the ground, choking on her blood. She looked at me and reached her hand towards me. I don't want to die, was her final words before she fell limp. This was my first time killing a human, not a monster, a human. Yet, I still barely felt anything. In the test, all things are legal, including murder, so I wasn't punished for killing another human. So, after the test was finally over, I explained to the instructors of what happened during the final test. You guys might think that I'm a sociopath or a psychopath, but I was just trying to survive. What did you want me to do? Let her kill me? I found out later that it wasn't just my team that got slaughtered, but others as well. There were 16 people remaining in the program. Usually, after the test, we become fully fledged hunters. But it was different in this program. The 16 hunters remaining have to go to the evolution process. Basically, they perform surgery as well as injecting you with a serum. That serum was basically the super soldier serum in Captain America. However, it had the chance that it could kill you, so only 9 people survived the first Monster Hunter program. They do the program every 5 years to make more stronger hunters. I soon found out why they trained us more harshly. It's because the stronger you are, the more chances of you surviving the serum. Thanks to the serum, I become stronger, faster, and my senses are beyond what a normal human can do. But yes, that is it. That is how I got my powers. However, just thinking of these past memories gives me a headache. It's a time I really don't like to dwell so often. While I feel indifferent, I could never forget my first kill. My life has been full of death whenever it's by my hand or monsters, and I doubt that won't change anytime soon. However, this is it for now, folks. I'll see you guys in the next log. Farewell.